Okay, so this is something I tried with Crash 2, and then I tried it with Crash 3, but my favourite game in this series is the first one. So of course, I was going to try this one as well. Here we go. Can you beat Crash Bandicoot if every crate is a Nitro? No. Alright, come on. There's a reason why I did 2 and 3 first. I already knew that this game would be impossible to complete if you replaced every crate with a Nitro crate. And that's not actually because of stuff like this clip that I just showed you. And it's not because of things like this either. No, it's that kind of thing that makes a no breaking any crates challenge impossible when the game's unmodified. But the real problem with the Nitro version is this sort of stuff. Whatever tricks you use to get past those other types of obstacles, nothing is going to change the fact that this bitch of a box in the 3rd level is something that you are required to jump onto in order to continue. There's no twist here, there's no subversion. The answer to the question, can you beat the game, is an absolute firm no. But, as I said, this game is my favourite. I mean, the original Crash 1 is my favourite game just in general. This is the Insane Trilogy version because there aren't any Nitros in the original, but the point is, I really love this game, so I still wanted to see how much of it is possible to beat. And you know what? I was surprised by how this one turned out. As with the other games, you can find a link to this mod in the description. This time it's a bit different because it does leave some crates in their original form, and as I work my way through the game now, you'll see why I decided that was necessary. So let's just give it a go, shall we, with a new game on a new save. Extra rules and stuff I'll worry about as and when they become relevant, which will be very early on. But the first level, Insanity Beach, is no problem at all. There are a lot of crates on these steps, but they're all arranged in a way that lets you avoid them. And you can jump onto the scenery here to help you get over this wall. If you take the right-hand fork, where the path splits, well, it might actually be worth trying to figure out a way to cross this, because there will be some crate bridges like this later on that cannot be avoided, but this level gives you an alternative route, which is much safer. So if you just go that way instead, that is level 1 sorted. Oh. I'm joking. These crates that drop on your head to show you how many you missed at the end of each level, they aren't real crates. The mod doesn't actually affect them. You will spend a lot of time on this screen though, because you won't be able to break most of the boxes in the game. But if you just want to beat the game, that doesn't matter. So it's on to level 2. Jungle Rollers is fine to begin with. I should say, if you weren't aware, this is a much more strictly linear game than 2 and 3. So I will be playing every level in order, just skipping the extra levels. And
Hey! Yeah, you! I've been doing this for 10 stinking years! Back and forward, and I'm sick of it!
yeah, it does help that a lot of the time you can use enemies to destroy Nitros, but you can't do that with these Nitros. And yeah, if you were to try to beat this game without breaking any boxes, this is the point where that challenge comes to an end. But as I mentioned, this wall isn't the reason why beating the game when every crate is a Nitro is impossible, because all it takes to overcome something like this is an Aku Aku mask. There's no way to pick up any masks in this level or the previous one, but if you die 6 times in the same place, the game will start giving you free masks because it assumes you're struggling. And once you have a mask, you can just walk through this and the exploding Nitros won't kill you. But with the other Nitro challenges that I've done already, I decided that this strategy should be avoided, because otherwise you could just use Death Abuse to give yourself up to 2 extra hit points whenever you want, and that kind of makes the whole thing too easy and too boring. Sticking to that rule made the other games much more of an adventure than they would have been without it. And sure, okay, I've already written off Crash 1 as impossible, so it's probably alright to do this in places where I don't think there's any other possible way to beat a level, so that's what I would recommend doing, mostly because the only alternative solution I found for this made me feel physically unwell. But before I demonstrate that, let's explore exactly why this wall is such a problem. Because this challenge isn't exactly the same as one of those no-box challenges. Now that these crates are nitros, they're a lot more active. They randomly bounce up and down and sometimes do weird things. You may have seen me take advantage of that behaviour before. And it is possible that openings may appear in the wall over time. It is quite common to see the crates on the top layer get stuck on that ledge up there, leaving a stack of only 2 to get over. But that low ceiling will still prevent you from being able to jump that. And after doing some tests, I can tell you that even with only a single layer of nitros on the floor, the ceiling will still stop you from clearing them. However, there is something else you can do when you're faced with a single nitro sitting on the floor, or a row of them. I previously discovered that in Crash 2 and 3, you are able to destroy a nitro crate without getting hurt by sliding and spinning and jumping in a particular way, as long as there isn't another nitro on top of it. I thought that sliding was a necessary part of the trick because it lets you move faster and jump higher, which helps you to escape the blast. And you can't slide in Crash 1, so I wasn't expecting to be using that anywhere in this game. But what I've now realised is that you can do it without needing to slide. Now, these nitros on the floor with nothing above them is just a test that I set up. I deleted the others. I've never seen anything as tidy as this happen naturally to the wall. And under normal circumstances, I haven't had the wall transform in a way that gives me an opportunity to use that trick. But I happen to know that nitro crates in this game can be coaxed into acting even more erratically than usual. The less smoothly the game is running, the more likely you are to see crazy things happening. I really noticed that while making thumbnails for my other Nitro videos, because I usually turn the game up from 1080p to 4K when I want to take a nice screenshot. And doing that here made these nitros shift around a lot more than they ever had while I was just playing this level normally. So with that in mind, I wanted to see what would happen to this wall if I totally fucked the performance of the game. I didn't just turn the resolution up, I changed the settings of my graphics card to force the game to run on integrated graphics instead of the proper GPU. And this is what that does to the Nitro wall. There's quite a variety of strange things that this can cause, but the most useful thing that can happen here is for one of the crates to be pushed away from the others towards the player, because that creates the perfect kind of scenario where you can blow up a lot of nitros by using the trick I showed you on just one of them while it's not surrounded completely by all the others. It's not quite that simple though. If you're able to break the game to the extent where something like this happens, it almost certainly won't be playable enough for you to be able to make the kind of highly specific movements you need to make to pull that trick off. So to actually gain anything from doing this, I always had to go into the game settings and put the game back into a state where I could actually play it. And playing this at 720 on a screen that goes up to 4K without being able to go full screen, because this game is a horrible broken experience on PC, that means you have to get much closer to the screen than is comfortable to see what you're doing. And once you have the game in a state where you can move around properly, the nitros want to revert back to a sensible layout as fast as possible. So you kind of have to rush if you want to take advantage of this before it all resets. So most of the time, you're not going to get this right. So you'll have to repeat the whole thing many, many times. And just trying to navigate these menus when it takes about 30 button presses before anything registers, that's really unpleasant. All of that combined gave me like a debilitating headache and, I don't know, some kind of motion sickness. But if you can stomach it and you can somehow get this wall into a position where there's one crate that's slightly separated that you can safely blow up, you can destroy all of these without needing any masks. I don't know where this method rates on the cheating scale compared to something like death abuse. I mean, forcing the game to give you a mask isn't a glitch or a bug or an exploit, it is an intentional gameplay mechanic. But after everything I went through with the other games, I felt it was necessary to present an alternative. And I promise I did spend a fair bit of time looking for a different way to get past this. Like, there is an area right above this that you can access if you've collected the green gem. but I couldn't find a way to clip through the wall or anything like that to skip these nitros. And yeah, it's kind of irrelevant because you can't get any gems with the game like this, and even normally you can't get this one until later on. And this isn't the right kind of setup for Coco's exploding phone to be useful, although you can't unlock Coco until later either. And if I was going to play as a character I shouldn't be able to use here, then there are probably better options anyway. And of course, I did do what I've done with other difficult levels before, and I left the game to play this one on its own repeatedly a few thousand times. But it really wasn't until I screwed around with the performance of the game that anything helpful happened. So I guess it's up to you whether you think it's a better or worse form of cheating than using a mask. The point is, there are ways to get past that wall. And hey, after that, the rest of this level's very simple. I should mention, I will not be able to use bonus rounds as checkpoints in this game, like I could with 2 and 3. In Crash 1, you access bonus rounds by collecting special tokens, and the vast majority of them are inside boxes. That makes them impossible to collect now, so we will not be visiting Torna at any point during this. But anyway, that is level 2. It wasn't quite as clean as the first level, was it? There were some questionable tactics in there, I'd say. But as I said, it's not that nitro wall that makes this challenge impossible. It's level 3, the Great Gate, that's the end of the road, regardless of how you get to this point. This should be an iron arrow crate, as should all of these above it, and also all of these. As far as I know, there is no way to beat this level, or even really start it, when every crate is a nitro. In Crash 2 and 3, in every place where you'd normally use an arrow crate to bounce up to the next area, it's still possible to progress without them. But even with all of the extra moves you have in those games, even with the almighty double jump, this is on a totally different scale. So to make this level even playable, you have to leave these as arrow crates. To be fair, these aren't breakable crates, and they don't count towards the box total, and they serve exactly the same purpose as the piston platforms in some of the later levels. The fact that they're in the form of iron crates isn't much more than an aesthetic choice. So I think there is a potential argument to be made that maybe doing this shouldn't mean the challenge is void, but after having never changed any crates back to normal in the other games, I personally feel like it should. But hey, let's not get bogged down in that just yet. We haven't even seen if the level's possible beyond this point yet. And you know, those arrow crates are not the only thing to worry about here. These 4 nitros are in a bit of a tricky pattern. You can jump through this gap, but the fact that there's one nitro just sitting there with nothing on top of it does mean that the same trick I used in the last level will work here too. So that's probably the easier way to do it. But then this tower, oh dear, you cannot jump over a stack of 3 crates. The crates themselves can jump pretty high, so maybe you can slip underneath them. I mean, people love telling me there's a place in Crash 4 where you need to slide under some nitros, and like, that's the intended way to get past them. The difference there is that those are programmed to jump up and down at regular intervals, so they're not really true nitros. And I did really try to see if you can just run under these. For a while, I had a whole corner of my living room set up to run experiments on this level and the previous one. I did not see anything particularly interesting happening in either. So just like Jungle Rollers, I am going to say you either need a mask for this, or yeah, it's not hard to push the game into doing that. I promise the whole playthrough isn't just going to consist of forcing every obstacle to collapse like that. For example, here's some more nitros you can explode safely. Having said that, once you've bounced up to the next section, now that you can, there's another stack of 3 crates. So even if, against ludicrous odds, you somehow manage to run underneath or jump through the middle of those other crates, you still need to find a way to do it again to get past these. So yeah, past that point, you have to be very careful jumping over this box and this one immediately after it. But apart from that, finishing the level isn't too tough. Level 4 is boulders, and it's very straightforward. There are not many crates at all in the actual chase sections, so as long as you don't hang around in these tunnels long enough to automatically jump forward in fright, then there's nothing difficult about this one. Upstream is also pretty simple. These platforms always give you plenty of space to avoid the nitros, and there's no horrible walls or anything. It's very chill. These last couple of levels are a welcome relief after a bit of a brutal start to the game. At this point, you do have to fight the first boss, Papu Papu, but no boxes here, and you don't unlock any special abilities from the bosses in this game, so nothing to say about this, really. Rolling Stones might have been a tough one if it wasn't for this very convenient plant fella. Just like Jungle Rollers, there's a lot of places you can spin enemies into nitros to get rid of them, but I think that wall at the start is the only place you really need to do it. Everything beyond that is totally doable. And then this is the first riding level, Hog Wild, and it's the only one that I'll be playing. To unlock the other one, you need to complete a Cortex bonus level later in the game, so that won't be happening. And anyway, I've had enough of these kinds of levels after Crash 2 and 3, but this one, being the first in the whole series, has got to be the easiest. It's just about getting used to the layout of the boxes, the same as with all the other hazards. Might take a few tries, but nothing impossible. In fact, there hasn't been anything impossible for a while now, has there? But then you get to Native Fortress, the bigger and better version of the Great Gate. It starts off in the same way, and there are even more places where you need to use arrow crates to reach the next section. So yeah, it has been a good run of levels, but there are more compromises that need to be made here. With all of these back as arrow crates, you can make a lot more progress than you can in the Great Gate before you hit any major snags, but well, this looks familiar. We all know how I'm going to get past this, let's not dwell on it, because shortly after that tower is this monstrosity. This is twice as tall as all the others. Surely there's no way the game could lag to the extent that this would... Oh, never mind. That was easier than I thought it would be. But look, the reason why those spiky pillars weren't moving was because I did cheat to get up here for easier testing of this part. It's a painful enough experience already to mess with the graphic settings while it's running that slowly. Having to replay the whole level up to this point every time I failed at this just to establish whether or not this can happen. No, thank you. Of course, in reality, I've been using death abuse masks to skip these parts when recording these levels, but the good news is that huge tower was the last point in the game where either giving yourself a mask or glitching the nitros like that is going to be the solution. This is the final level on the first island out of the 3 in the game, and it marks a bit of a turning point in the challenge, because this is the first Aku Aku mask in the game that you can collect without needing to die several times first. The first legitimate mask, if you will. It would be very easy to lose this mask between here and the end of the level because there are a couple of tight jumps in this last section. But you can keep the mask all the way to the exit, which means you can take it with you to the next level on the next island. This is level 9, Up the Creek. This is harder than the first river level because there's quite a few of these small platforms with a nitro on them, often at the top of a slippery tree trunk, so it's not always easy to get past those safely, but there is nothing unavoidable. So for the first time in any of these nitro challenges, I've been able to keep a mask for an entire level without losing it. That means I'm also starting a boss fight with a mask for the first time. This is Ripperoo, and this boss fight does actually contain some crates. This is the only place in the whole series where big TNTs appear, unless you count these. Big TNTs do behave like proper crates if you put them into other levels, and I really like doing that, but they're not used in that way here, and there isn't really a way to turn them into nitros and have the boss fight still work, so I think it's fair to exclude the bosses from the nitro mod. And if you beat this guy without getting hit, you can keep that mask and take it to the next level, the Lost City, which gives you another free mask right at the start. God, it really feels like the game is mocking me here. This wall is laid out exactly the same as the one in Jungle Rollers. Having just one collectible mask in that level would have been so helpful. Here I am with 2, even though this wall is completely out of the way. This is a side-scrolling level, so you might think having these masks would still be helpful after those Nightmare Fortress levels, but this one's a lot more 2.5D. It doesn't have invisible walls restricting your movement, so you can get around all of these nitros. It does get a bit more exciting at this point though, because you can find another floating mask just off screen here. I already have 2 masks, so collecting a third is going to give me temporary invincibility, which is something else that's never happened in any of my Nitro challenges before. Once I pick this mask up, I'm going to be able to run straight through every single Nitro that I come across without taking any damage for like 20 seconds. There would have been so many places in these games where this would have changed everything. This is a monumental occasion. Just imagine how many crates I'm about to smash through without getting hurt. This is gonna be so good. Here we go. One. It was one. And I think I probably could have found a way to deal with this one if I didn't have any masks. These masks would have been so helpful on the first island, but here, so far, they've been completely unnecessary. But I still have 2 masks here, and it's pretty easy to keep them both all the way until the end of the level. So you can start Temple Ruins with 2 masks. That could be pretty useful. It's not too hard to accidentally blow yourself up if you spin a snake into a group of nitros like this. And there are plenty of places where there's only a narrow ledge if you want to walk around a nitro, so it's good to have that protection. But this is yet another level that you can beat without ever taking a hit. You can keep 2 masks for the whole level, but Road to Nowhere starts with my worst nightmare, a wall of nitros.
Your worst nightmare has arrived.
So there's finally a place where these masks are actually helpful. Just kidding, you can very easily jump around this wall, and that's the most complicated part of this level. You can ignore all the boxes after that without too much difficulty, but just because you can get from the end of level 8 all the way to the end of level 12 without ever losing any masks, it doesn't mean you need to. It won't actually benefit you at all to still have 2 masks at the end of this level, because it's become tradition with these Nitro challenges for level 13 to always cause me problems. In this game, level 13 is Boulder Dash, and okay, it's not a huge problem this time. It's just that when you enter a boulder level, you lose any masks that you have. So however many you have at the end of Road to Nowhere, you'll be back to none at this point. Boulder Dash itself isn't much harder than the first boulder level. These levels are definitely significantly easier than, for example, the Diplodocus chases in Crash 3. Doing this without any masks is fine. It would be absolutely typical of this game if the next level started with something that's impossible to get past after that run of levels with masks that I didn't need. And Sunset Vista does not do that, thankfully. This has always been my favourite level, so that would have been pretty upsetting if it had. It is a long level, so not having any checkpoints can make it more challenging, but just like the Lost City, this kind of side-scroller makes it easy enough to jump around nitros when you want to. And not too far into the level, if you know where to find it, there's a mask you can pick up. You know how I was collecting loads of masks that I never ended up using earlier? That slightly irritating portion of the challenge is over. Apart from a quick boss fight that's coming up, this level marks the end of the second island. Yeah, it was a fair bit less complicated than the first, and taking some masks onto the final island is something I very much want to do. So it is more important now that I hang on to this one. Most of the crates in this part of the level are easy to avoid though, and when you make it up to this point, you can grab another mask. Again, this one, you're probably going to want to keep. I'd say the nitros on these pillars are the hardest ones to dodge in this level, but once you've figured out exactly where to line yourself up, you can safely get past them, and everything after that is pretty much as it would be normally. So you can end Sunset Vista with both of those masks. And here I am at the third boss, Koala Kong. This feels like the original game where you were always given 2 free masks for the boss fights. Similar to Ripperoo, there are crates here, normal TNTs this time, but again, they aren't treated like real crates, so I've just left them as they were. And like Ripperoo, if you beat Koala Kong without getting hit, you can keep the masks. Heavy Machinery is the first level of the third and final island. And look at that, there's a mask right at the start. Now you can destroy this Nitro safely using the trick I showed you earlier, but you cannot jump high enough from the floor to reach the mask. The only way you're going to get that mask once the Nitro's gone is by damage boosting off the little drone guy or the hot pipe. And that's going to cost you one of the masks you already have, so it won't actually achieve anything. But I would say that finishing this level with 2 masks intact is going to be pretty beneficial for what's coming up next. You may be able to beat this level without ever taking a hit, but literally the next crates you'll see after the first one are arranged like this. And I am just so done with this kind of bullshit now. I am starting this level with 2 masks, and there's another mask right there that would give me invincibility if I could get it, so I refuse to continue past here without that happening. It's time to introduce you to another trick that I started using in this game. This is something that I've had happen quite a lot just accidentally while playing these Nitro mods. Occasionally, when you're trying to jump over a Nitro, if you don't quite make it, you can land on top of it and take a couple of steps and it won't explode. Up until now, I'd only had that happen unintentionally, and it was never something that I had needed to use to get past anything. I have no idea what causes it. I think in Crash 4, they made it so if you're jumping over a Nitro and it hops up at the same time, you'll be able to jump off it without getting killed, because that is a pretty unfair way to die, but that's definitely not a thing in this game. So as far as I know, it's a glitch. And I don't know how to do it consistently, but if you're able to get it to happen here, it is possible to jump onto this Nitro and then jump again and it will not explode, which means you can pick up that mask while you still have 2 masks already. And you know what that means? Oh, now that was a lot more satisfying than the first time I got 3 masks, wasn't it? And yeah, I don't know how realistic it really is that you could come into this level with the 2 masks you get in Sunset Vista and get that 3rd one on your first attempt. I mean, I did actually manage it the second time I ever tried it, but then it did take a lot more tries the next time I went for it. So, yeah, it's unlikely, but if you look back at all those Nitros I just blasted through, you can see why trying to get through that without invincibility would be a bit more work. So, I still have 2 masks here, even though the visuals are a bit broken. And luckily, the rest of the level is a lot easier to do without taking any hits than the first section was. So you can bring 2 masks with you into the next level. Cortex Power. For most of this one, as long as you don't get lost, avoiding the Nitros isn't too hard. It's really only this one small platform where you need to be careful. But at the very end of the level is this. That distance is quite a bit further than you're able to jump in this game. And this is one reason why it's helpful to have 2 masks at this point, because you can use one of them here to get across. If you can make it as far as this crate with your first jump, then you can get to the other side. Alternatively, it should be possible to use the Nitro jumping trick that I did in the last level here, so you probably can keep both masks, but it isn't essential to do that, so I am finishing this level with 1 mask. Next is Generator Room. It would be quite handy to have 2 masks here because there's a lot more of these small platforms and narrow walkways that require getting very close to the Nitros, but you can always get around them. The thing that's harder to avoid is this wall of Nitros here. This happens to be like the only part of the level where you can't jump around the crates because of this sort of caged tunnel thing. So after holding on to at least 1 mask all the way from Sunset Vista, I'm going to be losing this one here. Of course, there may be something else you could try here instead, but I don't need to, so I'm not going to. Everything after that is out of the way. Toxic Waste is one of the simplest levels in the game. Most of the crates here are off to the side, so there's only a few you ever come close to, and by this stage you'll probably have got a feel for where to line yourself up to run straight past nitros like this safely. You could stop to blow these up if you want to, because they're always just single boxes, but if you do stop to do that, you give the barrels more time to spawn, so there'll be more hazards to deal with up ahead. So it probably is better to just run straight past. But for the most part, you can treat this level exactly as you normally would, and once you've beaten it, you get to fight boss number 4. This is Pinstripe, and the stakes are a bit lower this time because I don't have any masks that I really want to keep. Also, there's no TNTs of any kind with this one, so nothing to even consider changing about this fight. But you know what? It's a shame that this isn't the kind of game where you can pick up enemies' weapons after you kill them, because Pinstripe's Tommy gun is pretty effective at dealing with nitros. The High Road earned a bit of a reputation in this remake for being one of the more difficult levels, but just like in Road to Nowhere, any crates you encounter, you can jump around. So it's not a whole lot different in this version. There are never any crates on the actual rope bridge sections, so nothing changes there. It's not too bad. It's the next level that's often seen as the hardest in the original Crash one, Slippery Climb, but it's another one that isn't really affected at all by the nitros. Most of the crates are in these alcoves in the background, and the others are easy to get past. It is still harder in this version because you don't have any checkpoints, but you have to beat this level without dying to get the gem normally, so if you're able to do that, you should be able to do this. And weirdly, I think when you have the game modded like this, Slippery Climb may actually be the easiest of all the side-scrolling levels, just because it isn't really made any harder than the normal version. But a level that is changed quite a lot by the Nitro mod is Lights Out. The whole concept of Lights Out is that it's completely dark, and whenever you collect an Aku Aku mask, it will temporarily provide you with some light. Of course, all the Aku Aku crates in this level are now nitros, so it might appear that this level is unplayable in this state. But if you happen to be a total fucking badass, you can beat the level without even needing to see where you're going. Well, I think you can, anyway. What I did was just turn all the brightness and colour settings up on my TV until I could see without any masks. But you can't tell that I did that from the raw footage, so it looks like I'm doing something impressive. This is closer to what I could actually see while playing this. There is one Aku Aku mask that's not inside a box in this level, near the end, so this gives you an idea of how this is supposed to work. If you cheat the way I did, then you don't need that mask for a light source, but even though Aku Aku masks work totally differently in this level to normal, if you have one with you when you finish it, you can still bring it with you to the next level, which is Jaws of Darkness. Although the name might suggest it, this isn't another extremely dark level, so the mask I started with has turned back into a normal one. And this level's going to be another one of those where I want to keep that mask all the way through. I should probably mention that even if you do get across that bridge back in Cortex Power without losing a mask, the way that Aku Aku works in Lights Out means you cannot leave that level with 2 masks. So I would have always been starting this level with a maximum of 1. These temple levels are pretty open though, so it's usually not that hard to jump around any crates that get in the way. As with many of the later levels, this one is quite long and full of dangerous things. This level does have the most boxes of any level in the game, but a lot of them are in the bonus rounds that you can't access, so you don't have to worry about them. And of course, keeping that mask all the way until the end means it'll come with you to the next level. Castle Machinery. If you have the green gem, you can skip this level completely, but I don't because it's not possible to get it, so I have to take the long way round to get to the exit. We are getting close to the end of the game, so this is another fairly difficult level, but at least to begin with, there aren't a whole lot of nitros to worry about. Castle Machinery definitely starts out much easier than its predecessor, Heavy Machinery anyway, although there is one crate that is almost guaranteed to fuck you the first time you do this, if you're not ready for it. You just have to make sure to fall to the side so you don't hit it. This part looks like it could be a problem, but it's a great place to use this trick to clear out the bottom row. No need to lose a mask here. This, however, may be a different story. Remember this from the start? Yeah, this is not as simple as the crate bridge in Cortex Power. You can't make this by just jumping off the nitros once. It's too far. So you have to jump off the nitros twice. But even if you have 2 masks here, if you blow these up after your first jump, there'll be nothing left for you to land on after your second jump. which means the only way to reach the other side of this is if you could land on and then jump off the nitros without them exploding, so that they're still there for you to jump off a second time. So this is the same thing that I did at the start of Heavy Machinery. How fitting that it's this level where I have to do it again. And as with that first time, I have no idea how to do this consistently, or even if you can, but I've been able to do it a few times, so it can be done. See? I assume it must be possible that if you can make the first jump without them exploding, you can make the second one too. But unless you know how to pull it off every time, it's not going to be very likely, so it's pretty lucky that you can have a mask at that point. Again, I'm not going to claim that I've ever been able to actually hold on to the mask from lights out all the way to here and then do this first try. I'm just showing you that it is possible. Anyway, after all that excitement, there's only one more crate in the whole level, and it's not a problem. And that takes us to the penultimate boss, Brio. He puts up a good fight, but no crates means nothing to worry about. Let's move on. The lab is essentially the final level of the game, and it's impossible. Oh, it was going so well, wasn't it? This time, it's not because of arrow crates that you need to use to bounce up through the level. It's the series of switch crates that you need to hit to open all the doors between this point and the exit. Now, if you want to be absolutely technically accurate about it, the switches do still open the doors if you turn them into nitros and manage to blow them up without getting hurt. But that's only because they work slightly differently to the other switch crates in the game, so they weren't covered by the code I used to disable all the normal switch and outline crates. I decided to take that extra step to stop switches from acting like switches back when I made the Crash 2 Nitro mod. And so for the sake of consistency, I think I have to say that if breaking these nitros still opens the doors, then I haven't properly turned them into nitros, have I? And therefore they should be left as switch crates if I'm still going to have them functioning as switches. Maybe I'd do it differently if I hadn't already had to change those arrow crates back. Maybe I can upload a fully nitro version of this level with the nitros still acting like switches, if anyone wants it. I mean, that does make the level harder, and I think more interesting, especially because you then only get one chance to open each door, but I did decide to switch the switches back to switches. That's not to say the level isn't still interesting with only most of the crates being nitros. There are a couple of places where you'll see a door opening without you needing to do anything, and I realised eventually that it's because if you have a nitro on top of a switch crate, when the nitro hops up and then lands on the switch, it will actually activate it. I had no idea that this was a thing, but if you just watch this room for a second, you can clearly see that's what's happening. I really love that kind of thing. Like, I've experimented a bit before with the idea of using switch crates and outline crates and other gameplay objects to sort of replicate the kind of thing we used to do in Little Big Planet back in the day, building logic gates and stuff out of falling blocks and things like that. And I think if you ever wanted to include some kind of randomizer logic in a level in this game, this would be a really fun way to achieve that. But I may be getting distracted slightly, sorry. Apart from the whole debate about the switches, there isn't really anything else to say about this level. This would be a pretty painful end to the game if you had to rely on jumping on these nitros without exploding them. But thankfully, you can just stand on the side here and avoid them completely. And so that is the lab. There is one more level after that, which is the Great Hall, but there are no crates at all in this one. And if you don't have any gems, there isn't anything you can do here. As I said, you can't get any gems in this game, so the only thing left to do in the game is fight the final boss. Well, this is the only thing left to do in order to beat the game, but the lack of nitros makes it a bit of an uninteresting and anticlimactic ending, so yeah, there is one extra level that is accessible after all. Stormy Ascent is a DLC level available from the start of the game, so not being able to get into the bonus rounds doesn't prevent you from playing it. This is the level that was scrapped from the original game for being too hard, so you might expect it to be a real bastard with this mod, but it's the sequel to Slippery Climb, and it's very similar in terms of the boxes. Most of them are in the background, out of the way. So the only thing that really makes it any worse than normal is the absence of checkpoints. I think the last time I tried beating this level without dying was probably when I did the time trial for it when the DLC first came out 5 years ago. So it did take me a few attempts, but this level is optional, so that's okay. beating the rest of the game wasn't as bad as I was expecting. I went into this one thinking there would be a lot more impossible stuff than there was, and even though you can't beat Crash Bandicoot if every crate is a Nitro, you can do it if every breakable crate is a Nitro, it turns out. If you don't think all the methods I used were fair, then you can still rely on death abuse. There were never more than 2 obstacles that I glitched past in any one level, and you can give yourself up to 2 free masks in each level, so that is an option. The rule I was playing with in the other games was something that I came up with, so, you know, it's perfectly viable to do that. This was a little different to Crash 2 and 3, but I am really glad that I did it. It's pretty fun to play your favourite game in a slightly different way. One of the things I love about this game is that it's like a single continuous adventure, a journey across the islands. I find that much more interesting than the warp room style games that take you to random disconnected locations. And when you do try to limit your use of masks to just the ones you can pick up, and you don't go back to old levels to collect them again, it accentuates that feeling of adventure even more. I also find it really interesting how neatly the game is split up across the 3 islands when you play it like this. You got the first island where having some masks would be very helpful, but you don't get any until right at the end. And then on the second island, there's masks all over the place that you don't even need. Although it is still nice to have that protection, the masks there are more useful than they would be in some games.
My duty is to protect you.
And then the third island, the way I propose doing it, plays out a lot like the way I did the Crash 2 Nitro challenge, with the number of obtainable masks being the exact number that I needed. Although I'd probably approach Crash 2 and 3 slightly differently if I was to do them again now. But the question is, am I going to do this with any games that I haven't done yet? Well, I certainly don't plan for this to be the only thing I do from now on, and doing it with the games in the Insane Trilogy has been sort of parallel to my work on the level editor and stuff like that. Branching out into the other games in the series would be a bit more of a distraction. Although, as I briefly showed last time, I kind of have already modded all of them in this way, just out of curiosity, so I don't know, maybe I'll investigate some of them properly at some point, or oh, maybe not, fuck this.
Blech.